Greetings, friends, fellow citizens, fellow patriots, and even non-citizens who watch this podcast. Welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I am the host of this podcast. I am the president of the We the People Convention organization. And this podcast and our website and our text messages and our emails and our donations to dozens of other conservative groups around the country are all paid for by the generous donations of those of you who give to the We the People Convention. And we want to thank all of you who have done that for the past 15 years. Some of you have been giving for 15 years, and some of you are new. And we appreciate all of you, whether you give $5 a month or $500 a month. We just, we exist because of your donations. And if you're new to this podcast and you have the means, you can go to wethepeopleconvention.org and donate what you can. Again, we prefer, a recurring monthly donation to help us with our cash flow. But thank you to all of you who donate to make this possible. For those of you who are new to this podcast, welcome to you. You're joining an army of patriots who for the past 15 years have fought to protect and defend your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And you are seeing in your life today the result of that 15-year effort, which took a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and money, and continues to require that. And so welcome to you. For those of you who've been with us for a long time, God bless you all. Thank you for your support, not financially, but for your emails and your text messages and your handwritten letters and your encouragement to me and to this organization to continue to fight, to continue to guide our citizens to a path where we can take action to protect and defend our individual freedom and liberty and prosperity. Yes, we will have, this is a long podcast. I know that. I try to edit it, and we have our chapters player so you can skip things that you already know and just look at things you don't know, because there's a lot of things you had not heard that are going to be in this podcast. But the bottom line is that we don't just talk, we take action. And I'm going to show you a dramatic example of that you did this week after I encouraged you last week, that the whole reason for watching this podcast is to be informed, to share that with your fellow citizens, and then to act. And if you're not going to act, then what's the point, right? So I'm glad you're here today, because that means that you are serious about you protecting and defending your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, and joining with all of us collectively to do that, which makes us effective. So welcome to all of you. I hope you had a wonderful Dad's Day last Sunday. Many of you reacted to the text and email and story we put out that, anyone can be a father, not everyone can be a dad, and we need more dads. And so I hope you had a wonderful Dad's Day. I certainly did. I just, thank God for our children and for our grandchildren and for our family. And so we had a great day. We're going to get started with today's podcast. And, the giant in the room is the, Iran, Israeli war that just broke out, last week. And, the debate has been fierce. And it's an interesting thing because it has been a debate mostly among MAGA. The left isn't even talking about it hardly. It's a debate from MAGA, and it's been pretty intense, but it's good. I know a lot of you don't like some of the ferociousness, I guess, of the debate. There were lots of name calling and things, but it's important that we, the real patriots, the people who believe in individual freedom and liberty and prosperity, are willing to have debates about difficult issues, right? We talk about canceling censorship and things, and then people get upset when we have a debate within our own camp. That's what it's about. That's what America is about. And that's what just happened this week. And as hard as it is to watch sometimes, it's critical to us making better decisions. Okay? So the story at this moment is that President Trump gives himself 2 weeks to decide whether to strike Iran or not. Based on the facts that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. And what does go mean? Well, that's an interesting question, because go in its narrowest scope means we're going to use this 40,000 pound bomb that only the B-2 bomber can carry to take out this Fudor reactor that's buried in a mountain in Iraq to destroy their nuclear capabilities. And there is all kind of debate about whether that actually will work or not, and all that. Should we give the bomb to Israel and give them a B-2 bomber so they can do it? Should we do it? Lots of discussion, lots of debate, okay? However, that scope of let's just drop these bombs and then we're done goes into now, well, the bombs won't work, and now we want regime change, and that's going to take boots on the ground, and we're like, we don't want boots on the ground, right? And so it's been a tough week of debate. Trump is going to decide. At the bottom line is, we've got to trust him. His instincts are good. He has not been one to have long wars. He doesn't start wars, he ends wars. Okay? And that's what I think is on his mind here, because he has said since way before he ran for president that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and that's true. Why? Why can't they when Pakistan and India and Israel and all these other countries have nuclear weapons? Because Iran, because of their ideology and the Ayatollahs, your radical Islamic beliefs, doesn't believe in mutually assured destruction, which is the thing that says, hey, you may have nukes, Russia has nukes, but they're not using them on Ukraine, because if they did, they would be attacked by Britain and the United States with nukes. That's the deterrent. But if you want to die and go be with Muhammad, if you had a nuke, you would use it. That's why they can't have a nuke. I know that's simplistic and there's more to it, but that's the gist of it, okay? They can't have a nuke because they're nuts. And you can't have somebody who's nuts have a nuke. Now, you can say there's radicals in Pakistan, and there's, some people say there's radicals in Israel. But the people with their fingers on the buttons, they're not nuts. The Ayatollah and his people are nuts. So there's an interest for the United States in this. People say it's not our fight, it's Israel's fight. Let them fight it. And we're happy that Israel's fighting their fight. But here's the reality. Since 1979, Iran has said America's the great Satan and it's death to America. They are making huge strides in missile technology. They're giving Russia lots of equipment and drones and things. They are working on an intercontinental ballistic missile so they can strike New York and Washington and San Francisco. That's a fact. And then if they have a nuclear weapon, that's not good. So overall, Americans and MAGA support the idea they can't have a nuclear weapon, and we need to do whatever it takes to stop that, okay? And here's polling, and again, by CNN again, that basically shows this. Watch this.
Overall, I feel like there's more support for Donald Trump's positions than is comically acknowledged. Oppose Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I mean, look at this. 79% of adults agree on that. They agree with Donald Trump. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. 83% of Republicans, 79% of independents, 79% of Democrats. When you get 79% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans agreeing on anything, you know that that position is the very clear majority in this country. And so the American public is with Donald Trump. They definitely oppose Iran getting nuclear weapons.
So this is a nuance here, but, Trump and Netanyahu both arguing that Iran is close to being capable of making a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, what is the feeling of Americans as to whether the United States should get involved in this conflict?
Right. If you buy Donald Trump's theory of the case, and I think that's important to note, this is polling from April. If Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at this. Overall, you get the slight plurality. I mean, it's within the margin of error, but the slight plurality of Americans actually favor U.S. airstrikes compared to 47% opposing it. Now, here's the other nugget I'll note, right? There's been a lot of talk online and on social media and in podcasts of a divide within the Republican ranks. But here on this question, if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at that. 69% of Republicans, the clear vast majority of Republicans, favor U.S. airstrikes on Iran, on their nuclear facilities. But there is this substantial minority, 27%, who oppose such an idea. So it's not surprising you're hearing those other voices besides Donald Trump out there. There are plenty of them in the Republican ranks who oppose the U.S. striking Iran if they're trying to make a nuclear weapon. But the clear majority of Republicans are with Donald Trump if, in fact, Iran is trying to make nuclear weapons. They do, in fact, potentially favor U.S. airstrike.
So that's important data. Now, let me take it a little further, because there's two other things that are important from these polls. One is that none of us, particularly MAGA, trust that you can have the diplomatic settlement to Iran, because like China, they just lie. They won't do it. So that's part of the reason why we're like, you know what? We're in favor of you using military options so that they don't have the ability to do it. You don't just say, oh, they're going to sign a piece of paper and we promise not to do it, because they've done that years ago. And they still kept enriching and stuff like that. Number two, right? We say, we're for a weapons, a bombing campaign, but we're absolutely against troops on the ground. Absolutely against. And I don't believe Donald Trump will do that, even if they attack our troops, which are in the region. And this is the part that sucks. We have 40,000 U.S. troops in the region around Iraq, around Iran, in Iraq, in Syria, all these places. Why? Why? America first. Get them the hell out of here. Bring those 40,000 troops home. That's the problem. I'm listening to an interview Tucker Carlson had with Dan Caldwell just on Thursday, and he's talking about our military, these troops, our sons and daughters, are actually training people who are Muslim extremists to try to keep Iraq, stable or whatever. It's madness. Bring them the hell home. And Trump tried to bring the troops home from Syria, and his own people lied to him and told him there were far less troops there than there were. And then they bragged about how they lied to Trump. And this is part of the problem, where Trump is trying to get decent information, but the deep state wants us to attack. They want to derail the whole MAGA agenda. They want to stop all the tariff negotiations. They want to stop all of the plans that Trump has that we voted for, and do what they did with George W. Bush, derail him completely and throw us into this war. I don't think there's a chance that Donald Trump's going to do that. Why? If you look at 9/11, if you look at Afghanistan and Iraq and what went wrong there, you know what went wrong there? After we had victory, like Desert Storm, you need to come home. Donald Trump is not going to put us in a position where we fight for 20 years. He's not doing that. You got to trust him, okay? But in the meantime, this is serious, and it's complicated, and it's dangerous. There's all kinds of issues, okay? And so I want to talk about a couple of those things. For instance, this story I didn't think a lot of people saw, so I want to share it because it shows how smart the Israelis are. Again, you remember the pagers that they killed all the Hamas people with the pagers that, they sent a message and it blew up the pager and killed a bunch of their leaders? Well, they did it again. How Israel lured Iran's top generals to their deaths will blow your mind. Okay? As of Wednesday, the Israeli operation to destroy Iran's nuclear program and its ballistic missile capabilities continue to pace, with launchers and production facilities becoming prime targets. In perhaps the most dominant, decisive show of military force this century, the IDF managed to gain air superiority in the first 3 days of strikes and has been able to loiter over Tehran without consequences. By the way, Israel's not lost a single fighter plane in this whole time. Okay? I'm not sure enough people truly appreciate how insane it is that Israel was able to pull this off. Once again, the incredible gulf between America and Russian military technology is being laid bare here. To say Iran was a paper tiger would be an insult to paper tigers. With that said, we're learning some stunning details about how things got to this point. Let's see. According to a new report, the subterfuge used to get all those IRCG generals into a single bunker is like something right out of a spy novel. Emma Segal told the Call Me Back podcast on Monday what Israel did was create a fake phone call for 20 members of the Air Force senior staff and called them to a specific bunker in Tehran. This meant there was no one to give the orders to fire the initial salvo of 1,000 ballistic missiles, as Iran had previously threatened to do, he added. The added bonus for the Israelis was that the Iranian military leadership was essentially crippled from the moment of Israel's first strike against the world's top sponsor of terrorism. As the Chronicle reported, Mossad had used false communications through Iranian channels to call the meeting, which successfully lured the entire senior leadership of the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force, including Command General Amir Ali Hajadi, his deputies, and the key technical personnel into a fortified bunker outside of Tehran. Israeli intelligence service infiltrated Iran's back channels and then placed 20 different fake phone calls. Those calls instructed them to meet in this bunker, and the entire place was blown to smithereens. So that's war, right? That's using your brains like we did in World War II with inflatable tanks and things to make the Germans think we had more troops for the invasion than we thought and all that. Okay? Then Israel, some of you may have seen on X or, on other social media, the video of the Iranian woman newscaster putting out propaganda and the studio starts to blow up. Okay? Kind of remind you of Baghdad Bob back in the old days, right? And so what did Israel do? They literally took over through hacking the broadcast networks in Iran and started saying, you need to overthrow the Ayatollah. This is your chance. So lots of stuff going on, but it ain't all roses, kids. Okay? There's tough stuff going on. And I said they hadn't lost a plane, but a lot of these missiles, not a lot, a percentage of these ballistic missiles from Iran are getting through. They hit a hospital in Israel because they don't have the guidance. The Israelis have U.S. technology and their own technology. They literally put missiles through the window of a suite where certain leaders were. That precise, okay? The Iranian stuff, they're just launching it and it's landing wherever the hell it lands, okay? So that's a big part of this. But Israel is running out of interceptors. And this is true. I've seen several confirmations of this. At least one U.S. official believes that Israel is running out of medium-range ballistic missile interceptors as the Iranian regime continues to attack cities across the country. A report by the Wall Street Journal claims that the U.S. has been aware of Israel's situation for several months and has helped augment the country's defenses and has moved significant missile assets to the Middle East. That's why these destroyers, U.S. destroyers, are being sent to be right off the coast of Israel because they're having to help intercept these missiles because Israel's running out of weapons. And this is the race. So here's what it comes down to. Iran has thousands, like 2,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles. The race is that Israel's fighters and bombers have to destroy those missiles before they can all be used because they don't have enough interceptors to stop them all. Okay? So one side or the other is going to win that fight. And if Israel runs out of interceptors, they'll be sitting ducks just like Iran. So, serious issues there. And then the Dan Caldwell thing with Tucker Carlson, he's a really interesting guy and who knows he worked at the Pentagon and one of the guys he just purged out and stuff. And he'll tell you, this is a mess. Regime change is a mess. None of this is easy. And the U.S. has to be very, very careful here. And the fights, that are going on got really ugly between Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, who want Trump to do nothing, okay? And Mark Levin and the deep state players who want the U.S. to go full in and, this is our fight and we've got to do it. And we, the people, the MAGA folks particularly, are kind of in between those two camps. And so it got pretty ugly where Trump, it was like an Elon Musk thing. I mean, what the hell's going on with some of our people? They're losing their minds. But Trump was calling him loony Tucker Carlson. And then he said Carlson called him and apologized. But the rhetoric's got to stop. Okay, it's got to stop. No, I don't mean that. The debate can continue, but you got to keep yourself in a position where you're arguing facts and you're not hurling unfounded accusations. And that's what we're trying to do here. But I want to now talk about how it's hard to do because you can't tell what you're really, what you're really seeing and what you're not really seeing. Now, this is some, again, Donald Trump, and I know by the reception he received when he did that Middle East tour where he went to Saudi Arabia and Arab Emirates and Qatar and stuff, they treated Donald Trump like a king because they respect strength. So what did Donald Trump say? He said, get out of Tehran now. You're in danger. And what happened? Look at this video. And I'll turn down the volume because I have to read the captions for you, okay? Video posted on social media show bumper-to-bumper traffic leaving Tehran amid Israeli strikes on Iran's capital. Okay? And then he said, but the image also come as Donald Trump urged all residents to evacuate Tehran in a June 16th Truth Social post. And here you can see bumper to bumper, like they're leaving a hurricane. Iran should have signed the deal, Trump said, okay, and you need to get out. So think about this. Iran's a country of 95 million people, which Ted Cruz didn't know, by the way. That was another embarrassing thing. The Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz thing, I didn't like that very much at all. I didn't think it gave you a lot of clarity, okay? There's good in it. And it exposed Ted Cruz for, some things that are not good, but also to expose Tucker Carlson for some things that are not good. So it was a net not good. But my point is, this is affecting millions of people. Okay? Now Trump says, I'll let you know in 2 weeks. Where the hell are all those people going that are driving out of Tehran? Are they going to go hide in the mountains? I don't know where they're going. But now they got to wait for 2 weeks. And I don't think it'll be 2 weeks. I think Trump is giving them a chance to say, listen, we're going to cut a deal. And while we all agreed we don't want a diplomatic deal, what I think the deal is, because Trump says, I want unconditional surrender. That's Japan at the end of World War II. Unconditional surrender. Well, what does that mean to me? That means that Trump's saying, here's the deal. We're not going to trust you to not do nuclear weapons. You're going to surrender. We're going to bring in experts and we're going to blow the hell out of all parts of your nuclear stuff. And we're going to either arrest your scientists or whoever has the ability to do it, and we're going to neuter you. That would be total surrender. And whether the Ayatollah stays or not, Trump's like, that's up to you, the Iranian people. But if he doesn't have the threat of the bomb, what does he have? So, and then there'll be carrots with the stick, right? Trump will do a great trade deal. Because I got news for you, folks. Iran is full of smart people. The Persians, many Iranians have been educated in U.S. universities. I ran into them 30 years ago when I was at Gannon College in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they were really smart people. The Persians, the whole Arab world they founded mathematics and language and things like that, and then the whole Islamic radicalism stifled it. But if we could make Iran part of the world again and unleash their productivity and trade, that would be great. That would be the right solution. But can you get there? I don't know. All I know is if anybody can, it's Donald Trump. But he's being undermined at home and abroad. Okay? And so I want to talk a little bit about some of this stuff. We fought like hell to get Tulsi Gabbard appointed as the director of national intelligence because she had been in Congress, she had been in the military, she had a strong anti-CIA deep state attitude, and she's done a great job. But what did we hear all week? Oh, Tulsi Gabbard's on the out. Tulsi Gabbard and Trump are not together. And Trump had this line where Tulsi Gabbard, the news said, Tulsi Gabbard said that there was no chance that, Iran was on the verge of a nuclear weapon. And then Israel attacks. And then Trump says, well, I don't care what Tulsi said. We were concerned about them having nuclear weapons. But then Netanyahu gets interviewed and says, well, yeah, we did it because of nuclear weapons, but that's a year to 13 months away, which they've been saying for years. So Tulsi Gabbard wasn't wrong, but she's being attacked. So I'm going to link to this story so you can read it all. I'm not going to read it all. A Dangerous Moment, the targeting of Tulsi Gabbard. And this is by our friend at Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse. And he says, for the sake of urgency, I'm going to talk in direct and bold terms about the targeting of Tulsi Gabbard. The IC system is attempting to remove her as a disruptive influence by using Iran as a wedge to get her out. But the issue they have with Tulsi Gabbard has nothing to do with Iran. Conservative Treehouse approaches this after being very concerned about Tulsi Gabbard's ability, not because of intent, but rather we doubted her understanding of the scope of the IC opposition aligned against an effective office of the Director of National Intelligence. So he thought she didn't have the experience. He's proved her wrong. Gabbard started out with these weaknesses, but she learned quickly. Grasped the opposition, has become a transformative force within the intelligence community. Director Gabbard's recent efforts within the IC Inspector General's office is another feather in her cap of confidence. So why? Gabbard is now a threat to the intelligence community. If President Trump allows or supports the removal of DNI Gabbard, he is opening up the backplate of his armor and making himself vulnerable. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Tom Cotton, the disassembled National Intelligence Council, and a host of intelligence community embeds would like to see Gabbard removed. DC wants to see her removed because the traditional role of DNI has been willfully blind tool of the Intelligence Committee, and Gabbard is not. Okay? So this week, I literally heard people saying, oh, Trump's going to fire Tulsi Gabbard. She's out. Then I saw something that said, hey, this story where they quoted Gabbard as saying Iran doesn't have immediate nuclear ability, that they misquoted that and there was more to it, and that Trump and Gabbard are on the same page. You got to hope so, because she's the kind of counterbalance you need. She isn't owned. She isn't in this job to get money from Lockheed Martin or somebody. She's a real patriot. And I'm asking you to pray for Tulsi Gabbard. And thank God she's there. And pray that President Trump doesn't get misled and throw her out, because we need her. We need that dissenting voice. We don't need yes people. Trump needs debate. And, he'll make up his own mind, but he at least needs to hear other opinions. So that's important. So then this story came out, and I need to share it with you because, again, what do we really know and what don't we know? Okay? This is from Laura Lomer, who's a little bit, on the fringe, but she has incredible investigative ability and has broken amazing stories. And President Trump does listen to her to a degree. Okay? Because why? She brings receipts. Okay? She brings receipt, and she's also not owned and has been threatened and everything. But she came out with this expose on Tucker Carlson, which got my attention and should get yours. And I'll read from it because it's important. Okay? So there it is on the screen, part of it, where she shows the documents. Here's a screenshot from the FARA documents filled out this year that prove Qatar paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for an interview between Tucker Carlson and Prime Minister of Qatar, the same Qatar that funds Hamas, regarding the war with Iran. This was a paid propaganda piece in which over $200,000 was paid by the embassy of the state of Qatar for Tucker Carlson to interview a Qatari official, all while knowing Hamas is an Iranian proxy and funded by Qatar. These are not good people, okay? Qatar funds Islamic terror all around the world, and they think they can just pay everyone off to make them turn a blind eye. The Qataris are global funders of Islamic terrorism, and their money has been used to murder American citizens. Those are just facts. She's not making that up. That's not an opinion. That is documentable. Tucker Carlson wants you to think his thoughts on Iran are based and original, but he's literally participating in a paid-for interview by the Qataris, who are funding and providing penthouses and luxury lifestyle to leaders of Hamas in Doha. That's a fact. The Hamas leadership lives in Qatar in luxury, and we saw the Palestinian, people who are getting food aid saying they're living in luxury and telling us to keep fighting. We saw that video. I played that for you. Okay, Tucker Carlson should be honest that he's a mouthpiece of genocidal Muslims. His media company was literally funded by a Muslim investor who is half Pakistani and half Iranian, who spends a lot of time in Qatar. And trust me when I say a lot of people in pro-Trump circles are very uncomfortable with this. Tucker is controlled by Muslims. People need to wake up and stop pretending like this is a conspiracy theory. Qatar and Iran are buying off conservative podcasters to push pro-Islamist, anti-American, and anti-Israeli talking points to undermine President Trump. Whoa. Okay? Now, I don't know that Tucker Carlson is a mouthpiece for anti-Israelis and things like that. Okay? I don't know that. But we do know, because I told you the story months ago, that leading up to all this and Trump's trip to the Middle East, that Qatar was paying all kinds of groups. Every conservative podcaster suddenly had ad revenue that they never had before, and they talked about how great it is for us to be getting together with the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates and all these people. Okay? We're in the matrix. I said to you 2 weeks ago, and I said again last week, and I said in my video about Trump and the war, that 90% of what we think is true probably isn't true. So how do we know what the hell is what? How can you and I make good decisions? And I don't have a good answer for that, except to work hard, to share things that challenge my viewpoints, okay? Because again, now I'm going to look at Tucker Carlson. I'm not going to stop watching him because he has great guests, but I'm going to be careful. I'm going to not just suck it in and accept it. I'm going to question it, okay? So now I'm going to give you an example that's very important to me this week that most people missed, and I'm going to tell you how this makes it so hard for all of us. This is a great example. So this story, I don't know if any of you even heard this. Kristi Noem is alert and recovering after trip to hospital for allergic reaction. This is on Tuesday. Now, we're in the middle of Trump threatening to bomb Iran. Iran having, and Netanyahu said on Fox News interview that Iran tried to assassinate Donald Trump, okay? And Kristi Noem, one of the top cabinet members in the Trump cabinet, is rushed to the hospital. And my first thought was, is this an Iranian hit? Did they take out one of our people? How would we know? She had an allergic reaction. Okay, well, okay. And then the good news was that she was released later that day. Spokesman says Noem was released on Tuesday night. Okay, officials told NBC News that Noem, who postponed a scheduled press conference was scheduled Wednesday, had an allergic reaction and was rushed to the hospital under abundance of caution. That's a term that scares me. This abundance of caution stuff tells me that you're not telling me the whole story. So then the next thing I find out is on Monday, the day before she had this allergic reaction, here's a picture of Kristi Noem with RFK Jr. and Rand Paul at a biolab in Washington, D.C. She was at a biolab. And so I'm pretty sure the abundance of caution was that maybe she got exposed to something at the freaking biolab. You didn't hear any of those stories. They weren't on Fox News. Did you? But can you see where I'm like, what's going? Is this an Iranian attack? Is it now she's at our biolab and she suddenly has this reaction? And then there's like no stories of her. I haven't seen her publicly yet. So this is what I'm saying. What is really going on, man? It's hard to know. It's hard to know. So that's my take on what's going on. And I'll recap. I'll put it together this way, okay? Because we spent a lot of time on this. It's real simple. The American people and MAGA do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We understand it is a threat to us. We understand they're nuts. That's why they can't have one. We understand that if we have a chance to stop them from having one, Trump should do it. But we do not want a diplomatic, negotiated settlement. We want them to not be capable, to remove the possibility. And we don't necessarily want regime change, and we sure as hell don't want troops on the ground. But if Trump can get them to surrender, which we think means we're coming in just like we did in Japan and destroying all your ability for military action, and then we're going to do a deal with you, and the Iranian people can decide, and we're not going to have our troops on the ground in there, and we want all our troops to hell out of the Middle East, okay? That's where we're at. Pray for President Trump. Pray for his advisors. Pray for our sons and daughters who are on ships and in jets and planes all the hell over the Middle East right now, because they are in harm's way. And this is serious stuff, okay? So I'll leave you with some good news on this topic, because it was good news and it is factual, and I do believe it. Warrior ethos. Navy smashes recruitment targets under Trump Hegseth. And there's a picture of Pete Hegseth doing push-ups on a naval vessel with his troops behind him. And this is one of the greatest stories of the whole Trump thing, that along with RFK Jr. and MAHA. There's this huge success story that you forget. But you need to know this. The U.S. Navy has announced that it has already met its recruiting goals 3 months ahead of schedule. Just weeks after the U.S. Army made a similar announcement, Navy Secretary John Phelan announced on June 18th that the Navy had added 40,600 new sailors to its rank. This milestone reflects more than numbers. It reflects the drive of our recruiters, the innovation of our team, and the courage of thousands of Americans who stepped forward to serve. Those in uniform today are sailing forward, and the next generation is already preparing to take the watch. To our newest sailors, welcome to the fleet, he added. This announcement comes after the Army stated earlier this year that it had met recruiting goals months ahead of schedules, with 61,000 fresh recruits recorded. Under the Biden administration, the military branch has struggled because of the woke ideology, the vaccine stuff, and the Army missed their recruitment goals in 2022 by 25%. And that's why our military was so weakened. And that's why you understand you've got to have a strong leader And we need these patriotic Americans to join, not so we can take them into war, but so we can prevent war. Believe me, China and Russia are watching what's going on. And it's sending a big signal. Don't mess with us. Peace through strength means you got to have strength. Thank God for Pete Hegseth, who so many didn't want to appoint as the Secretary of Defense. Thank God for Donald Trump. Peace through strength means nothing without strength. And so that's good news. And you should be proud of those people. And any of you who know one of these people, young men and women who've joined, reach out to their families. Thank them. That's a direct ask, right? We take action. I'm asking you, if you know anyone who has signed up to join the Air Force, the military, Navy, the Army, Coast Guard, Merchant Marine, I don't care. Reach out to their families and thank them. Make sure they know that you appreciate what they're doing, because we haven't done anywhere near enough of that since Vietnam. Let's be clear about that. So that was, good news. Good news. Okay. Now, I want to tell you about a big win that we had. So last week, I said President Trump was signaling that, well, I heard from Big Ag and I heard from the hotels that, you can't have your ICE people come into my farm because all my workers are quitting. And our hotels, we can't staff the people cleaning our hotels and stuff. And I went off. And after that podcast, I created a little video and I put it on this, page on our website. Okay. And then I asked you to message President Trump and say, no, because this is why we had so much illegal immigration before the lefties and the communists flooded the country to get electoral control. We had it because rich Republican business owners wanted it. Stop the Republicans from ever closing the borders because they wanted slave labor. And I talked about that in my video. And so there was a great piece that Meriwether Farms put out where she said, we don't hire any illegals. We pay the health care for our employees. We pay them a living wage. And we have no trouble getting that. And part of this big push, to stop ICE from basically doing the same thing to the farm industry and the hotel industry that they're doing to every other industry, which is if you're illegal, you got to go. Well, it was these people trying to protect their position that we don't want to pay Americans. We want to undercut your wages. So there was a meatpacking plant in Omaha that ICE raided, and there was videos of the owner saying, hey, I used E-Verify, and E-Verify is a fraud. And I thought these people were all legal, and they're not. And I lost all my employees. And then what did we see? We saw a story that said how a city in Nebraska is recovering after the state's largest worksite immigration raid. Okay, Omaha, Nebraska. Every seat in the waiting area of Glen Valley Foods was occupied with people filling out job applications early Thursday afternoon, 2 days after the meat packing plant became the center of the largest worksite and immigration raid in the state of Nebraska so far this year. Don't tell me Americans won't do these jobs, because we will. And I said in my video, look at Mike Rowe's dirty jobs. Americans do jobs that are unbelievably hard and horrible. And they're happy doing them because they get money that makes it worth it. It's a lie that you can't hire farm workers. It's a lie that you can't hire Americans to clean hotels or to do your gardening, lefties, right? The Democrats are out saying, how are we going to have people cook our food and clean our restrooms and do our gardens? The rich elite Democrats want slaves. That's what they want. They want slaves. And that's what they imported. And that's what the cartels provided. Slave labor. And you and I say, hell no. We reject this because it's not true. And so what do? We sent letters. You clicked on the link. Okay, I had a link on this story that said, click here and tell President Trump that you cannot do this. That's not what we voted for. We voted all the illegals must go. And what happened? If you follow us on X, and if you don't, get an X account, go to x.com, fill it out, and you just give them an email, and then search for Tom Z WTPC and follow me on X. But this was posted by DC Drano on X, and it said, Trump officials reverse guidance exempting farms, hotels from immigration raids. Nobody is above the law in America, and that means no sanctuary cities and no sanctuary businesses. These employers had 9 months to clean up their employment practices after Trump got elected. Now these illegals are getting deported, and those who are hired them should be held accountable. That within 3 days, because you answered my text message that said call to action, went to our page, click the link as easy as pie, takes you to the whitehouse.gov comment page where you can message President Trump and say, no, don't stop ICE from going to these farms and meatpacking plants and hotels to get rid of illegals because Americans can do these jobs. You did it. And he heard you. And he reversed his position in 3 days. That's why you watch this podcast. And if you don't take action when we ask you to, then don't watch this podcast. We are here to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. By getting illegals out of these industries, we will create jobs for your relatives, for your family. We will make our GDP better. That's the point. But you can't just hope for it. You can't just be a spectator. You got to work for it. Congratulations, patriots. You did it. The proof is right there. So I tell you all the time, from the beginning of the Tea Party, when we had our first Tea Party on July 11th of 2009, I said at that Tea Party meeting on the steps of the courthouse in Portage County in Ravenna, Ohio, I will never waste your time, your effort, or your money because I respect you too much. But when I ask you to ask, you got to grab your musket and run to the fight. That's a direct quote that I made in 2009. It's more than applicable this minute than ever before. Action speak louder than words. We're not just about talk. We're about action. So what is the action doing? This story, over 1 million illegals have self-deported so far under Trump's plan. This is awesome. This is awesome. While ICE arrests and deportations have grabbed headlines, President Trump is also running a separate but complementary mass deportation program that encourages aliens here unlawfully to go home voluntarily. How effective has the self-deportation been? One way to track the program is by checking employment numbers. One financial whiz cited by the Wall Street Journal calculated a decline in immigration population of 733,000 in the first 4 months of Trump. Washington Post claims 1 million foreign-born workers have exited the workforce since March. The Post frames this as a sign of weakening labor supply. Bullcrap. Bullcrap. I just showed you the meatpacking plant has people filling out applications. Okay? Yet the paper also notes average hourly wages accelerated, rising by 0.4% over the month to $36.24 in May, and earnings continue to beat inflation and a boost to worker spending. In other words, with fewer illegal immigrants, fewer businesses had to raise wages to attract American workers. Trump knows what he's doing. His plan works. But the aliens will only leave if they believe Trump and Homan are serious about arrests, and now they see that they are, and they're leaving. 1 million. Trump's only been here since January 20th. This is what we got. You're arresting them. You're going after the bad guys. You're fighting the fight in LA and across the country, but you're also giving the incentive. We'll give you $1,000 to leave. And so what is the net result of this? Well, reverse migration. Trump reverses mass migration. More people leaving U.S. than arriving for the first time in 50 years. Okay? Well, it's kind of like Biden claiming that, job growth after COVID, when you shut down all these businesses and then you start hiring them back and you claim job growth. Okay, so again, they let 12 million illegals in the country, and we just deported 1 million, and maybe 1.2 million, and we're going to do more. So yeah, there's going to be reverse migration, but that's what you and I voted for. And I want you to know it's happening. Okay? First time in 50 years. And so, we're still fighting the fight in LA, and the courts just ruled that Trump has the legal right to call out the National Guard, and Gavin Newsom lost again. Okay? And he's putting troops in other cities as well. But this is one thing that I really wanted to see, and I wanted you to know, because nobody's talking about this enough. Feds rain hell on Antifa mob outside Portland ICE facility. Portland and Seattle are the home of Antifa. We, the American people and the U.S. government, must use all military and police resources to arrest them and defund them, okay? But this story in Portland was important. Riots against immigration and customs enforcement officers have spread from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, the home of the radical left-wing group Antifa. As of Wednesday night, hundreds of mass protesters marched on the streets holding signs that argued and criticized ICE deportation raids, and more radical signs claiming that no one is illegal on stolen land, according to Fox News. Once the sun had set, demonstrators got confrontational. They rolled a dumpster in front of the entrance of the ICE facility and were promptly shot at with non-lethal munitions by federal law enforcement agents on the roof of the facility. The rioters were told to disperse, but defied the order, forcing the agents to physically engage the crowd. Officers in riot gear fired tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbangs into the crowd, driving them away from the building. The Department of Homeland Security cited the need for government vehicles to enter and leave the building as a reason for their use of force. Only 2 people were arrested, but the riot was ended. That hasn't happened. Portland's downtown has been burned to the ground because their leftist mayor, okay, and their leftist city council love Antifa. They are losing. We are winning. We want the feds there kicking the crap out of Antifa, and they just did it. And then I just want to just mention 2 other stories because, what is this all about? A U.S. attorney narrowly avoids murder attempt by an illegal alien in Albany. A U.S. federal attorney was attacked by an illegal alien who had been deported and was let back in, who was knife wielding and tried to attack him. Okay? And the attorney, to his credit, ran away, went into a hotel, and the guy was still outside, and he got worried that this nut was going to kill some bystanders, so he went out and reconfronted the person to occupy him until the sheriff came and arrested the guy. We had an incident here in Northeast Ohio where one of our congressmen, Max Miller, who's Jewish, was confronted by a doctor from the Cleveland Clinic who tried to drive him and his family's car off the road and said, "I know who you are, you Jew, and all the Jews should die." And Miller has video of it and stuff. A congressman. And Miller had to pull his gun and was ready to shoot the guy, okay? But was able to avoid the confrontation, and they arrested this guy. The left is about violence. We must be about law and order. And so we need to be on alert. But no mercy. No mercy for these people. You've got to be able to defend yourself and not allow this. And so look what's going on. They tried to, instigate all this, and it's not working because Trump is acting quickly to stomp out the flames before it bursts into a giant fire. That's what happened in LA, okay? But remember, know who we're dealing with. This is a canary in a coal mine. This tells you all you need to know. U.S. House votes 266 to 148 to block non-citizen voting in D.C. elections. What is this about? The bedrock of American democracy has always rested on a simple principle. Those who govern derive their authority from the consent of the governed. But what happens when the sacred bond between citizenship and political participation gets deliberately eroded by those sworn to protect it? For decades, Democrats have claimed to champion voting access where Republicans voted on integrity. Yet beneath this familiar theater lies a more fundamental question about who gets to shape America's future. The nation's capital became ground zero for this constitutional crisis when local politicians decided that citizenship itself was an outdated barrier to political power. The District of Columbia in 2222 decided to allow non-citizens voting, including illegal immigrants and foreign nationals, to vote in local elections, struck at the heart of what it means to be an American citizen. Let's be honest, this wasn't about inclusion. It's about diluting the hardened political voices that comes with citizenship responsibilities. This week, Republican-controlled House finally pushed back. In a decisive vote, representatives supported legislation in overturning D.C.'s radical experiment. The final tally, revealing 210 Republicans joined by 56 Democrats, voted to protect citizens' rights, while 148 Democrats chose to defend the political power of non-citizens. The Democratic Party is anti-democratic. They are not for you. They are not for us. They don't believe in the Constitution. They're trying to overthrow our government using illegals to vote for their radical leftist policies. So there's the proof. And anybody who votes Democrat, and we'll link this on our website, on our podcast page, you need to share that with anyone who voted Democrat and say, why would you vote for a party that doesn't support U.S. citizenship? Why should illegals have a right to vote in our elections? They're not U.S. citizens. Okay? So the whole immigration, the whole illegal alien deportation fight isn't about that. It's about destroying our nation and importing an army of leftists to take your vote. And that's what we're fighting. But this story, I just had to share this because it just shows you how serious the damage was that Biden and his lefty people did by giving the cartels billions of dollars. The cartels made more money than ever. Every one of those 12 million people who came across were paying thousands of dollars to cartels in Mexico for the right to be part of that. Okay? They infiltrated everything. They've sold drugs. They've sold children and women into prostitution. So what did we find just this week? Border Patrol found a massive tunnel from Tijuana to San Diego. This thing, the Border Patrol agents in San Diego, California, you can see a picture of the tunnel here, uncovered a sophisticated smuggling tunnel connecting California to Tijuana, Mexico. The tunnel, which reportedly extended over 1,000 feet into the U.S., but was 3,000 feet long, was discovered by the San Diego Sector Tunnel Team in April. The tunnel still under construction included a rail track for moving cargo, as well as electrical wiring, lighting, and ventilation systems. According to officials, the passage was about 50 feet underground at its deepest point, and basically is being used to send drugs in the United States on train cars. Okay? Well, you need to have a lot of money to build a 3,000-foot tunnel underground and put a railroad in it. That's what we're fighting. The Biden leftists didn't fight it. They funded it. They encouraged it. And so I'll wrap up with the NoKing Protests, which was a total flop. Last Saturday, when this podcast is going on, I told you it's a nothing burger. The whole NoKing thing was a failure. NoKing protests fall flat as Trump deportations gain in popularity. Okay? These protests not only came off as delusional, but as inherently anti-American. And I talked about the meme that said, no country with a king would allow a protest against kings, right? So their thing was completely wrong on the start. The name was stupid. They made a mistake. On June 14th, leftists around the United States planned to protest President Donald Trump, his mass deportation effort, and his second term as 47th president as a whole. Similar to other movements that have been advocating against Trump in the MAGA movement, these rallies were organized to describe the president as an overreaching tyrant, but fell extremely flat at nearly every single metric. The NoKing Protests ambitiously hope for participation in over 2,000 sites and millions of participants opposing Trump on the same day as the military parade was scheduled to celebrate the United States Army 250th anniversary. And I put that story up, and you can see the parade video replay, okay? And it's our page was great on that. However, their efforts fell flat and failed to even make us even a single dent in Trump's momentum, as his approval ratings continue to soar due to his policies resonating with the American people. American people overwhelmingly want all illegals deported. Overwhelmingly. There's no there for the left, okay? The reality, though, was quite different for the anti-Trump, anti-American left. There was such low attendance at many of these sites throughout the nation that many protests ended up being canceled as their promises were made that the energy would skyrocket. The Trump White House even labeled protests as a complete and utter failure with minuscule attendance. Now, of course, as the left does, after the Saturday protest, they claimed 5 million attendees. How could you count that? They claimed first it was 1,500 sites, then they said 1,800 sites. Now the story's talking 2,000 protests. Yeah, how many were there really? Well, we saw with our own eyes. I looked on X. I was tracking in our local community. These were very small sites. And a friend of mine who felt that they were much bigger than I was saying, but he said they were way smaller than the Tea Party rallies. Way smaller, okay? Because it's phony. It's paid. It's AstroTurf. And these people, we know for a fact, they were at one place and then they protested for an hour and then they went somewhere else and protested for an hour. So how many unique individuals were there? It's a joke. They claimed 5 million. There's no way. I will not buy that. Yes, in San Francisco and in San Diego, there were 200,000 in San Diego. Okay, there's 1.7 million illegals in San Diego. And they had 200,000 people protesting? That's not exactly, a popular uprising, okay? And it was phony. But in contrast, and I'm still trying to get good data, but I know for sure that Fox News had like 6.5 million viewers of the parade, and that Newsmax had almost 1 million. And then on X and other streaming platforms, there were claims of, up to 30, 40 million people watched the parade celebrating the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary, which was freaking awesome and made me proud to be an American. Okay? So contrast the two. They're a minority and they're not even real. Want proof? Charlie Kirk had this guy on this week. Short clip.
Where you identified some of these protesters do this for a living. Play cut 296.
Here's my press credentials.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so who are you with?
Right now I am representing myself, and I'm representing the folks at Rise and Resist who have been trained
so Rise
to
and
be
Resist.
marshals.
How much do they pay you to wear this vest?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
So I did some digging, and the woman trying to stop my interview is named Karen Shaw. She is a professional protester. I found her at almost 100 different protests. Let's look at her portfolio, shall we? Here's her outside Trump Tower saying TikTok time's up. Here's her saying ban guns, not drag. Amazing. This is her telling us that lies have consequences. She is also very passionate about abortion. Even in the video right now, she's just wearing a hat that says abortion on it.
Nate, she's made a career out of this.
Yeah. Yep. This is her second job, actually. So she's an associate director at Lincoln Center in New York City, which is a very prominent theater. It's beautiful theater, but she's all over the country, touring the country, protesting. And I just knew that that was going to be the case because no one behaves like that for free. I just refuse to believe that.
Yeah. And so you kept on, let's just say, your research, you kept on examining it, and there's a whole group of these paid protesters. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I've met them personally and dealt with them personally.
So he has a longer video that you can see on YouTube and Rumble where he just interviews all these people. They're all frauds. This woman, she works, I'm sure she makes a great salary at the Lincoln Center in New York, but they're paying for her airfare. They're paying for her hotels. They're paying for everything. we're not buying anymore. You're going to share that clip with other people who think that there's actually Americans who are against deporting these illegals. And you're going to make it clear, this is not real. Don't believe their lies because it's not real. And you want to expose it. And so 2 more things on the NoKing thing. Police find IEDs at home of heavily armed PA man arrested at PA NoKing's rally. A man was arrested Saturday at our NoKing's rally in Westchester, PA, on gun charges, is now in a lot more trouble after police found a huge cache of improvised explosive devices in his home after executing a search warrant. Okay? That's who's at these rallies. Nut jobs. Okay? We're going to talk about the shooter, in Wisconsin in the second half of the podcast. And then I'll close with this because this is critically important. We talked about this. We were messaging. I had a story on our website. Click to message Kash Patel and Pam Bondi to go after the funders of this. FBI IRS put riot funders on notice. Imprisonment and fines will come. Federal authorities are warning that individuals and organizations providing financial support to violent demonstrations, including recent anti-ICE riots in Los Angeles, will face prosecution. The message was delivered in a video statement Tuesday by U.S. Attorney Bill Isley, FBI Assistant Director in charge Akil Davis, and our Special Agent in charge Tyler Hatcher. In the video shared by the FBI's Los Angeles office on X, officials emphasized that while peaceful protest is protected under U.S. law, violence and coordinated attacks against law enforcement will not be tolerated, especially when they are financially supported. The right to assemble and protest peacefully is protected by law. Unfortunately, we've seen individuals whose intentions are to cause damage and to assault law enforcement. For example, last week we arrested an individual who was charged with conspiracy to commit and abetting civil disorders. Those violent agitators put peaceful demonstrators at risk by their actions. He stated federal law enforcement agencies are actively investigating individuals and organizations that are knowingly funding or committing acts of violence against law enforcement. That is a message they put out in LA in a video that will scare some of the lefty billionaire Hollywood types, okay? They'll start to get the message. We need to arrest one of those SOBs. We need to arrest a big name lefty who has funded all this nonsense, including Soros and his son, before we'll end this. You cut off their funding. They can't. There's no uprising. Yeah, there's some illegals who don't want to be deported, but why are you waving Mexican flags, right? And then if you want final proof that this is all phony baloney, okay, it's real simple. They were for Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Then they were, going after Trump, for the Tesla stuff. Then it was anti-Israel Palestine protests. Then it was anti-ICE deportations. What are they doing this week? They're supporting Iran. The same people, the same exact people, that guy in that video, are now out with signs saying, don't, stop Israel from attacking innocent Iran. It's all paid for. We have to stop it. And a lot of it's paid for by international actors that are affecting our political environment. Okay? That's the lesson we all need to know. That this is not real. It's not grassroots. It's not real Americans. This is all contrived. But the difference is, today, you watch this podcast, you share this podcast, and you know the truth. And you're not watching MSNBC and CNN and ABC and NBC News. And I got a great story about that in the second half because we had a major cultural tipping point along those lines this week. So we'll share that when we come back. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and we'll be back after these messages.
The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday. So if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday. And in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot.
All right. We're back for the second half of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the first half. I know there's a lot in it. You can use our chapters player, right? If you go to our podcast page at wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the podcast page, we have a player that comes out by Sunday morning that takes every story we do and breaks it into a separate section. So you can just scroll down and say, geez, I didn't know about Kristi Noem. And you click on that and it'll take you right to my video of that story only. And then further down and below the podcast player, or the chapters player, is a list of every story in this podcast with a link to an article where the story came from, or the video, the original video that I showed you. So use those tools to share the information, okay? And then I'll talk later at the end of the podcast about some of the things we're doing where I'm starting to put, there's this great software that we've paid to be part of that allows me to take the whole podcast and have it broken into shorts. These little clips that are on YouTube now that are starting to take off. And so I can post on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, shorts of things that are important. And I'm going to show you that we're having success with that at the end of the podcast. So, use the information to the best of your ability. Okay. But the key is to get more people watching so that we get more people to act on the things we're trying to do. And I showed you about the immigration thing that Trump was reversing on, the farmers and the hotels, your actions changed his action and protected us, our interest, the interest of capitalism and defeated socialism, right? Because slave labor ain't freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And that's what the illegals are for. They're slave laborers. No, we're not going to, we ended slavery in a civil war over 100 years ago. And the Democrats did it then, and they're trying to do it again. We are free for freedom and liberty and prosperity for all individuals, everyone. Okay? So that's why you watch this podcast. So I got some great stuff to share with you as we go into this. Is just really cool stuff. Okay, and I've got a lot of short stories. So we'll see if we can finish it in the normal time frame here. We won. Social media erupts over a SCOTUS ruling dealing fatal blow to transgender surgeries on minors. This was an awesome achievement. The Tennessee, like a lot of states, had put forward legislation outlawing any transgender surgeries, none of these growth hormones or any of this stuff. They basically were shutting down the trans mutilation industry. And in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on gender transition treatment for transgender minors in a case brought by a natural family. The ruling comes 6 months after the High Court heard arguments in the case that will likely have broad ripple effects for transgender youth across the nation, just not for the family who initially challenged the state in 2023. The bottom line is, it's now over. It's over. The Supreme Court has basically said that sane people and most states are already passing this legislation. And, the President Trump has said, we will not use any federal money to fund this. You cannot do trans surgeries in this state, in this nation, and he's going to go after people. Hopefully Congress will eventually pass a similar law and end this like they did in Sweden, in Norway, in the UK. It's over. It was a lie from the start. None of the quote unquote science about transgenderism was real. The studies were faked. The people that fell for this are victims of the most heinous, evil crime ever. This is Nazism. This is the Nazis experimenting on humans, in the death camps. These are supposed doctors at hospitals like Vanderbilt University, which is supposed to be one of our best institutions, cutting up children because of their own beliefs, not because of the children's needs. It's anti-medicine. And this Supreme Court ruling ends it. And so if it's not in your state, you be all over your legislatures. There's a call to action. If it's not in your state, you send this story to use the links on our podcast page to send that story to all your legislators and say, where is this in our state? End the madness. Great win. Another great win. I had said earlier that, we were having, so many victories that, President Trump is doing. And I said the MAHA was one of the ones. And it's interesting because I really believe this, that RFK Jr. is getting a free ride. There is so much going on all over the place, and Elon Musk was drawing fire and all that stuff, that the left has had a hard time zeroing in on what RFK Jr. is doing, and he's just pounding them, okay? And he fired the whole vaccine board and appointed some of our people on it, and the left went crazy, but then they were on to Iran and the war and this. And so he keeps going. I want to just play this compilation that Fox ran, because this week General Mills and Heinz both joined in, and we're going to have safe food. RFK Jr. is going to go down in history as the man who saved America's health by forcing companies to give us real food again. Listen to this.
Big food brands are making changes to their products as the Trump administration pushes to make America healthy again. So take a look. We start with General Mills. They're removing artificial food dyes from U.S. cereals and the foods that they send to our schools, K through 12 schools. That's going to happen by next summer. This is going to happen by the end of 2027. They're removing all artificial dyes completely by the end, like I said, of 2027. They make Trick cereal, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Cheerios, Rice Chex, the things that are probably in your pantry. Also, Kraft and Heinz, they're saying goodbye to the artificial dyes by the end of 2027. Includes Jell-O, Capri Suns, Kool-Aid, and Crystal Light. Then the In-N-Out Burger, they removed artificial dyes from strawberry shakes and pink lemonade, and they replaced it with the beet juice and turmeric instead. Their focus is on the red 40 and the yellow 5. Also, the high fructose corn syrup, they're replacing that with natural sugar. Then let's take Steak and Shake. Instead, they're using the beef tallow fat. We've heard RFK Jr. talk a lot about this. Instead of the vegetable oils to make their French fries, their onion rings, and their chicken tenders. And the tallow fat, it's still unsaturated, but it is a lot healthier than the heavily processed seed oils. Then all the spices in your cabinets. McCormick, many of those in my cabinet are made by this brand. Working to remove artificial food dyes and sodiums. Their focus is on the red dye number 3, which has been linked to cancer concerns.
Wow. What a list. How awesome is that? And why are they doing it? Why did I wrote on X, congratulations, RFK. Congratulations to President Trump. We're finally going to have safe food. Congratulations, General Mills, but you should have done it years ago because you should have acknowledged that it's immoral to poison people for money. So we're glad you're doing it, but you should have done it a long time ago. And why didn't they? Because they lobbied the CDC, they lobbied Health and Human Services, they controlled, they fudged all this data and surveys. The entire medical government complex was corrupted to do one thing, to not protect you and I, to not protect our health. And so we have all become really sick, all of us, because our government failed us. And now, because you elected Donald Trump, because the MAHA movement joined with us to elect President Trump, because President Trump kept his word and appointed RFK Jr., which they did not want, we are going to have safe food again. My goodness gracious. This is so awesome. It's beyond belief. And so that's the point. Because right now, you can't buy healthy food. Literally. Go try. Study what you should buy, as far as healthy food. Casey and Callie Means book talks about what food you should eat. Then go to the grocery store and try to buy it. There's about 10% in the grocery store that's healthy food. Because of RFK Jr., before Trump's term is over, I think that's going to be reversed. I think at least half the food in the grocery store, and maybe 80% of it will be healthy. And we will start looking slimmer. We will be healthier. We will be happier. We will live longer. That's why you fight to defend President Trump. That's why you voted for him. That's why we're going to make sure that the leftists don't win the 2026 election to stop all of this. Okay? That's what the fight's about. Huge wins. Huge wins. I mentioned that we needed to, follow up. The Minnesota shooter was captured this week, and this story just gets more and more bizarre because it just shows the mental illness that the left is creating in our country. The Justice Department on Monday alleged that the suspected shooter who attacked 2 Democrats, Minnesota state lawmakers over the weekend, had also driven to the homes of 2 other state lawmakers that night, but they weren't home. They were on vacation. This guy had a hit list of like 50 politicians that he was going to kill. And he works for the government. He works for Tim Walz. Vance Luther Butler, 57, was arrested on Sunday in connection with a fatal shooting of Minnesota Democratic State Rep. Melissa Hortman, a former House Speaker, and her husband at their Brooklyn Park home on Saturday morning. He also shot Democrat State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. They were each shot 17 times, and they lived. How lucky are they? Bowler has now been charged with 2 counts of murder with a firearm, 1 for each of the Hortmans, and 2 counts of stalking, etc. He had dozens of people on the list. Then this story comes out today, this morning, letter to FBI, okay? To FBI from shooting suspect made wild claims about Klobuchar, Amy Klobuchar, and Walz. In a rambling conspiratorial letter addressed to the FBI, alleged assassin Vance Butler claimed Governor Tim Walz instructed him to kill U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar so that Walz could run for the U.S. Senate, according to 2 people familiar with the contents of the letter. The letter is the clearest evidence yet of Bolter's mindset after the targeted violence against Minnesota politicians last week. It is incoherent, 1.5 pages long, confusing, and hard to read, according to 2 people familiar with the letter's content. It includes Butler alleging that he has been trained by the U.S. military off the books and that Walz, who is not running for Senate, had asked him to kill Amy Klobuchar and others. Walz spokesman Teddy Shasham said in a statement Friday afternoon, this tragedy continues to be deeply disturbing for all Ohioans or for all Minnesotans. Governor Walz is grateful to law enforcement who apprehended the shooter, and he's grateful to the prosecutors who will ensure justice is swiftly served. You know what also is happening? Notice that Walz has shut his big fat mouth, who was out there telling people to fight, who was instigating this violence. You notice that Walz has shut up. Too late. You're responsible, Walz. You're responsible. And the rest of you guys on the left playing this little game of, oh, we're not inciting violence, but you should go fight these people. And Maxine Waters, burn things down. Yeah, that's coming to an end. That's coming to an end, folks, because it's wrong. It's illegal. And then this was really good news to all of us in the Tea Party movement who suffered through the stolen election. Okay. FBI gives congressional intel on alleged Chinese plot to create fake mail-in ballots in 2020. Then there was a Gateway Pundits piece that Chinese whistleblower with royal ancestry steps forward, reveals video and photos of alleged Chinese counterfeit ballot printing operation of U.S. ballots for Mississippi, Florida, and North Carolina. And then Mike Lindell's case, the Dominion case in Colorado, was finally decided. So let me take those one step at a time because they're important. FBI Director Kash Patel on Monday evening turned over to Congress an intelligence report raising concerns that China had mass-produced fake U.S. driver's licenses to carry out a scheme to hijack the 2020 election with fake mail-in ballots for Democrat Joe Biden. And newly declassified intelligence reports from August 2020 weren't corroborated or fully investigated, instead were recalled from intelligence agencies at about the time that then FBI Director Chris Wray testified before Congress that there were known plots of foreign interference ahead of the 2020 election. He lied. And then they ordered that the evidence be destroyed, but it wasn't. The new documents were turned over to Senator Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who has first raised concerns that the Bureau, that the intelligence hadn't been fully vetted, instead was just dismissed, even though there was evidence of fake licenses. Okay? Then this ballot printing operation. There's actually pictures and videos of them in China printing ballots, U.S. ballots, and shipping them here. And then Mike Lindell's case was settled. And while they found Mike Lindell personally responsible for defaming the Dominion security guy who was caught on a conference call saying, Trump can't win, we made sure of that, okay? The jury dismissed the whole claim against MyPillow and all these like $96 million in damages, and the damage they allowed for this guy that worked for Dominion was like $3.2 million, and Lindell's going to appeal that. This was the big win. The media, the leftist media is trying to spin it as Mike Lindell was found guilty, okay, of saying false things about Dominion. But that's not the case. And you can go to that story and click the link and read the whole decision for Mike Lindell. But it was a win. Folks, things are starting to happen that you and I know needs to happen. We as a nation cannot just let what happened in 2020 go into history with all the lies. You can't do it, okay? So President Trump this week said, let the work begin. Trump says special prosecutor must be appointed to investigate the 2020 election. And I say, hear, hear. That's about time. Let's see. President Donald Trump has said a special prosecutor must be appointed to investigate the 2020 election, arguing the evidence of fraud is now overwhelming. The following revelations that the Federal Bureau of Investigation received intelligence of 2020 regarding a Chinese plot to mass produce fraudulent U.S. driver's license proves it. Biden was grossly incompetent. The 2022 election was a total fraud. The American First leader wrote on Truth Social platform, the evidence is massive and overwhelming. A special prosecutor must be appointed. This cannot be allowed to happen again in the United States of America. Let the work begin. How about if we appoint Sidney Powell to be the special investigator? How about if you appoint Rudy Giuliani, right? How about John Eastman, one of the great constitutional lawyers who was right about the theft and has been viciously attacked by the leftist legal institutions. John Eastman, special counsel, I'll tell you right now, you'll find out the truth. People will go to prison. So who they appoint is important. But it is very important that Donald Trump just said this has to happen because he's in charge. And Pam Bondi, who I think would appoint the special counsel, got the message. Maybe now we should be messaging who we want. Let's investigate that. If you have ideas, send me a text or an email at tomzwtpc. Send it to info@WeThePeopleConvention. Info@WeThePeopleConvention. Okay, just send me and say, this is who we should appoint for the special prosecutor to look at the election, theft. It's really important. Okay, so lots of good things happening. This was good to see because it's symbolic. 2 years after Biden administration ignored the East Palestine disaster, J.D. Vance and RFK announced investigation. A little over 2 years ago, the small town of East Palestine, Ohio, suffered one of the worst environmental disasters in recent history when a Norfolk Southern freight train derailed, spilling hazardous chemicals. Like most things that occurred during the Biden administration, a proper cleanup and investigation into exactly how the derailment happened and why we were way over the administration's head. Now, however, there may be finally some substantive help on the way because they're going to bring in a team and investigate what were the health care issues. And it said, I'm proud to announce that the Trump administration is launching a program to study long-term health effects of the chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio, and help residents access the care they need to deal with those outcomes. Right? That's what President Trump is. He cares about the little guy. He cares about the forgotten. But it's not just words. It's actions. That's what we care about. And that was a big thing to announce. As you know, you probably know that the Fed chair did not cut interest rates when all over the world, every other Fed has cut interest rates. And this guy, Powell, who Trump appointed and Biden reappointed, who's got one more year left, is a deep state operator. He's trying to undermine the Make America Great agenda. Okay? Every bit of evidence shows wages are up, inflation is down, okay? There's no threat of inflation growing. They should cut interest rates, and they didn't, okay? And Trump called him a dummy and attacked him, which he always does. Trump used his social media platform late Wednesday night to comment while sharing a story on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's regulator, Federal Housing Finance Director William Pulte, offering his opinion about Paul. Trump said, too late, Powell is the worst, a real dummy who's costing American billions. The guy from the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac said, President Trump has crushed inflation. Federal Chairman Jerome Powell needs to lower interest rates today. And if not, Chairman Powell needs to resign immediately. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can help so many more Americans acquire housing if Chairman Powell will just do his job and lower rates. And now there's a story out that some of the other Fed governors, because the Fed Reserve has these banks all over the United States, I think there's 12 of them. One of them came out and said there's going to be an interest cut, probably in July, because it's absurd. And when Trump says it's costing us billions, understand, we just crossed $37 trillion in debt this week. We're finally at 37 trillion. We're borrowing that money and we're paying interest on it. Okay, billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. A drop in the interest rate of a quarter point would save America, you and I, like hundreds of billions of dollars. And this clown won't do it because he hates Trump and he works for the left and he's got to go. So we'll see what happens. But what I love is that Trump doesn't back off and he keeps putting pressure. He'll get his way. He'll win the day for you and I at some point. But the result is this. This chart was really powerful. Scott Bessnet talked about this in an interview. Take a look at this chart. Real blue-collar wage growth. For those of you listening on the radio, the chart shows that under Nixon, that the real wage growth went up by 0.8%. And since then, under Reagan, it was minus 0.9%. Under Herbert Walker Bush, it was minus 3%. Under Clinton, it was minus 0.6%. Under George W. Bush, it was down 6%, 0.6%. Under Obama, it was down 0.3%. Under Trump, real blue-collar wage growth was up 1.3%. Under Biden, it was down minus 1.7%. And under Trump, they're now up 1.7%. Now, what does that mean? A real blue-collar wage growth? Well, let me tell you what it means. Blue-collar workers have seen real wage growth of almost 2% in the first 5 months of President Trump's second term, the largest increase for any administration in nearly 60 years. The 1.7 pay bump is a stark contrast to Joe Biden, according to new data from the U.S. Department of Treasury. The only other time it has been this high was during President Trump's first Treasury term. Secretary Scott Bessent told me on the latest episode of Pod Force One podcast on Wednesday. We see real wages for hourly workers, not supervisory workers, real blue-collar workers, rise almost 2%. No president has done that before. Falling inflation has driven a significant improvement in blue-collar wages, lifting workers' take-home pay and living standards. Biden opened the border and it was flooded with illegal immigrants. And for working Americans, that was a disaster because those illegals forced down wages and took our jobs. So what's going on here is, yes, with the tariffs, if you bring all this manufacturing back to the U.S. and even the farmers, what I talked about, Trump reversed with the farmers. But the Meriwether Farm said, we're paying our farmer workers living wages. So their beef might cost a little more, but if you're making enough money, you can afford that beef. And so what this chart is basically saying to you is that the growth in real take-home pay by blue-collar workers, ordinary citizens, is ahead of the rise in inflation, and therefore they are better off. Their living standard is rising. This is huge. And take note, no other president has done it except for Donald Trump in 60 years. This ain't small. This is huge for you, for your sons and daughters, for the lower income working people in our country. Donald Trump won because of that, and he's going to win again because of that. It's awesome. I talked to you last week about we're not broke, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I did the video. We are not broke. We have $200 trillion in assets. Yes, we have $37 trillion in debts, but we shouldn't be borrowing money. We should be selling our assets to cover our debts, because that would then force us to not spend more because we wouldn't want to sell our assets, right? So I made the case. Some people wrote back and said, that's crazy. We can't do that. And so Mike Lee in the Senate bill has proposed selling up to 3 million acres of public lands. Senator Mike Lee of Utah is pushing to sell up to, now get this, 0.75%, meaning 0.75% of Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service lands in up to 12 Western states except for Montana. Okay, so we talked about it. Marjorie Taylor Greene talked about it. That story's on our website. And now Mike Lee's trying to do it. And it's just stupid, the response. Let's see. The Republican majority of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee is calling for the U.S. government to sell up to 3 million acres of public lands in order to hit revenue goals in the federal budget and to make room for housing, land to build houses on, because in the West, there's cities that don't have any houses and there's no land to build it on, okay? Language requiring the government to, quote, dispose of millions of acres of land was inserted to the committee's draft bill, which was released this evening by committee chair Senator Mike Lee. The bill would require consultation with governments of each state affected and require consideration of the extent of which the development of the tract of Bureau of Land Management land or National Forest Service land would address local housing needs, including housing supply and affordability. Federal lands protected from sale, according to the committee bill draft, include national parks, national monuments, national wildlife refuges, and wilderness areas. But the number of acres at play is significant and is by far the biggest proposed federal land sale in modern history. Shut up. 3 million acres sounds like a lot? Yeah. In just those 12 states, not including Montana, the Bureau of Land Management owns over 251 million acres, and the Forest Service controls 146 million. So that's 400 some million acres. We want to sell 3 million acres, and conservatives and leftist nut jobs are attacking him. And Glenn Beck did a great video. It's on our X account, Tom Z WTPC. You can see on Glenn Beck's other stuff where he interviews Mike Lee and goes, oh, Mike Lee, you want to stop hunting and you want to hurt the wildlife and you want to destroy our national parks. And it was all satirical. And Mike Lee said, no. I just want to do common sense. We have assets. We have needs. Use them, right? And people are fighting back, including conservatives. What the hell? The government is the people. They shouldn't own crap. It's our land. And people are going, oh, we can't sell this. You can't sell the land. Go to this story, okay? I'll post it on our website and share it. And then write to your congressmen and senators and say, yeah, we're all for this. It makes sense. Because you know what the dirty little secret is that Glenn Beck talked about is? Our Forest Management Service doesn't have the money to manage the lands. Our Bureau of Land Management doesn't manage shit. That's why there's forest fires and crap, because they don't have the money to maintain the land. So why not sell it to someone who will? Oh, they might mine it or they might, build on it. We can't have that. We need pristine land. We got more pristine land than you could ever imagine. Oh, it drives me crazy. So I'm loving this. Stick it in your pipe and smoke it. Drill, baby, drill. Trump to unlock 82% of Alaska's petroleum reserves. This is awesome. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, let me go to that story. Okay. Quote, under President Trump's leadership, we're cutting red tape and restoring common sense policies that ensure responsible development and good stewardship of our public lands. The Department of Interior has released a draft analysis proposing reopening up to 82% of the 23 million acre National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska to oil and gas leasing. Initially set aside, now get this, initially set aside as an emergency oil supply for the U.S. Navy in 1923, okay, the reserve was transferred to the Bureau of Land Management in 1976. In 2022, the Biden government closed nearly half to the oil and gas drilling, reversing policies from the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, aimed at boosting energy development. The new DOI proposal reverses the restrictions as part of President Trump's policy, pushing forward regulatory reform and unleashing American energy dominance. That is what we're talking about. These lands can be safely mined and drilled without affecting the caribou and the polar bears. It was all a lie, okay? And I'm going to prove that. Because why was it a lie? Green group with ties to Chinese Communist Party are part of a network influencing U.S. policy. Okay? What is this about? This isn't environmentalism. It's economic warfare. The Chinese Communist Party is using American nonprofits to make us dependent on their supply chains for solar panels to EV batteries, while our policy makers walk straight into the trap, said Michael Lucci, CEO of State Armor, which produced this report. A national security watchdog group is asking members of Congress to take a closer look at an energy transition advocacy nonprofit that has ties to the Communist Party. According to State Armor, the watchdog group, nonprofits are coordinating with U.S. climate groups to influence climate policy, advancing the interests of the CCP and undermining U.S. national security. A new report by the State Armor argues that the CCP is co-opting the American Progressive Climate Change Lobby to advance a transition away from fossil fuels, meaning to stop drilling, meaning to stop selling lands. They claimed it was environmentalism. It's just not true. I've talked this before. Let's see. I think here. Energy Foundation China is a nonprofit headquartered in San Francisco. It was originally known as Energy Foundation, but it spun off most of its U.S.-based operations in 2019 into a separate organization called U.S. Energy Foundation. State Armor report documents numerous examples in which Energy Foundation provide financial support to U.S. climate advocacy groups advocating for climate policies. They gave $84 million to the Anti-Fossil Fuels Group, including Climate Works Foundation and the William Flora Hewitt Foundation and the Climate Imperative Foundation. In 2022, the Energy Foundation granted $350,000 to the Rocky Mountain Institute. Through the years, according to Fox News, the foundation granted $900,000 to the Rocky Mountain Institute, which produced a study in 2023 claiming to find a link between gas stoves and asthma, which is often cited by policymakers and activists seeking to restrictions on natural gas use. You hear that, people in New York? Remember in New York where they were going to follow this bull crap and say you can't have a gas stove anymore? It's all bull crap. The RMI researchers used data from past studies to estimate rates of childhood asthma linked to exposure to gas stoves. The study has been criticized for failing to factor in its data a more comprehensive global study published in 2013 by the Institute International Study of Asthma and Allergies in Childhood, which utilized data from 512,000 children in 47 different countries and found no evidence of any association between the use of gas stoves and asthma. Do you see how you've been gaslit? Do you see how the Chinese paid millions of dollars to these phony U.S. nonprofits who don't pay taxes to do what? To hurt your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. We're at war with China. They have been at war with us for 50 years. And Joe Biden took millions of dollars from China. And so did Nancy Pelosi and Eric Swalwell and Kamala Harris and all the rest of them and Mitch McConnell to destroy your life. And Trump is fighting back and defeating them. And so it's really important. It's really important that we shut this down. We expose this nonsense and we drill, baby, drill, because it's good, not bad. The cheapest way to get people out of abject poverty is cheap energy. And the benefits far outweigh the environmental costs. The whole climate thing was an anti-capitalist commie scheme to destroy the West. Wake the hell up. So then this came out this week, and this was interesting. Trump pushing the House to pass the Senate crypto bill and pass it fast. And I was saying, well, what the heck is this? Okay, so the President Donald Trump late Wednesday urged the House to speedily pass the Senate's Genius Act, arguing it would propel the United States to become the world's leader on crypto and digital assets. The upper chamber approved the legislation 68-30, so there were Democrats on board on Tuesday. The bill would enact new federal guidelines for stablecoins. I'll talk about what the hell that is, and create a framework for private companies to issue digital dollars. The Senate just passed an incredible bill that is going to make America the undisputed leader in digital assets. Nobody will do it better. It is pure genius, the Genius Act. Digital assets are the future, and our nation is going to own it, President Trump wrote on Truth Social. We are talking about massive investments and big innovation. The House will hopefully move lightning fast and pass a clean Genius Act. He continued, adding, get it to my desk ASAP, no delays, no add-ons. This is American brilliance at its best, and we're going to show the world how to win with digital assets like never before. Trump Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has lauded the bill, saying that the stable coins would grow to 3.7 trillion market by the end of the decade. A thriving stablecoin ecosystem will drive demand from the private sector for U.S. Treasuries, which back stable coins, Bessent wrote on a post on X, adding the newfound demand could lower government borrowing costs and help rein in the national debt. Okay, so I need you guys to help me with this, because this stablecoin stuff ain't Bitcoin, okay? Bitcoin is digital currency that is not controlled by the banks or the government. It's digital currency where you and I can send money to each other and no one knows it. And no one has any business to know how you're transacting money. It's all about control. That's how they decide how much to tax you and stuff. So this stablecoin thing is a mixed bag. It's not Bitcoin, okay? But it does have some benefits to us. Access to stable money, especially in volatile economies. People in countries with unsustainable currencies, unstable currencies, Venezuela, Turkey, Argentina, can use stable coins like the USD Department of Treasury or USDC to preserve value. Give them dollar-like access without needing a U.S. bank account. Financial inclusion allows anyone with a smartphone and an internet to hold and transfer value, no bank needed. So that kind of sounds like Bitcoin, but it's really not. Useful for unbanked or underbanked people, both in the U.S. and globally. We talked about that issue where the government has the bank shut you off. Stablecoin supposedly is going to help with that. Faster, cheaper payments. International remittances using stablecoins can cost a fraction of traditional banking fees. Peer-to-peer payments are near instant and low cost without middlemen. I'm liking that. Programmable money. If decentralized finance users can borrow, lend, and earn interest on stablecoins without permission, puts power in the hands of the users, not gatekeepers. But this bill, this Genius Act, basically makes the backing of the stablecoins under the U.S. Treasury and backed by big banks and stuff. And they still could cut you off. It's not Bitcoin. It's not freedom and liberty we want, but it is a first move to allow for digital currency, which can be good and bad, right? Because we've talked about central bank digital currency, which is not what this is, but it could become that, okay? The problem with that is there are going to be no dollars, everything's bits and bytes, and the government can shut you off and take all your wealth instantaneously. This isn't that, but it's a step towards that. And it's not Bitcoin, but it's a step towards that. Any of you out there who are experts at this or have videos or articles you can send me to better understand this, but I wanted you to know because this affects your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. It does. It's a way for you to transfer money cheaper, better, and it's going to be backed by something that protects you against crooks. So write to me at TomZ or at info@wethepeopleconvention.org, info@wethepeopleconvention.org, and we can talk about that. A couple more stories and then we'll wrap up the podcast. Some interesting things. I had done a real interesting story on Elon Musk a while back. And that story was about the fact that I thought he was maybe addicted to drugs and that was affecting what he was doing. And Elon Musk this week shared a clean drug test after bombshell report about substance use in the New York Times. And he basically posted it on X so you could read it, okay? And of course, the left, downplayed it, okay? They said the tech billionaire took a rapid test nearly 2 weeks after he was accused of heavy ketamine use, though the urine test only reliable detects drug ingested between 2 and 10 days. So they're saying, he conveniently took the test after it would have left his system. I'm glad that he would have been able to clear his system, okay? Elon Musk shared the results of a recent drug test on Tuesday, which showed he tested negative for ketamine, ecstasy, cocaine, amphetamines, and other drugs a few days prior. It was taken 12 days afterwards. So there was, the New York Times was saying, well, this isn't really the right thing. If you do the test that involves your hair, you can see longer term growth. So Trump, what Musk did, he got a hair test done and posted that too. And then he said to the New York Times, now, you accuse me of taking drugs. I'm accusing you of taking drugs. I want the reporters that wrote that story to show their drug tests. How's that? They didn't do it, and they wouldn't do it. You know why? Because I'll guarantee that these lefty morons are taking drugs. They would never do that. Smart move by Elon Musk. Pretty cool. This story, I won't go too much into it because I think you guys understand, but Silicon sickness, AI chatbots like GTP feed into delusions, send users on downward spiral. This story is talking about the fact that generative AI chatbots like OpenAI's ChatGPT are driving some vulnerable users into delusional spirals and drug abuse and actually causing people to commit suicide. There's people who are not mentally well to begin with who are getting involved with these OpenAI, not just ChatGPT, but Grok and other things, Perplexity, and they're starting conversations and they're getting more delusional. Well, one guy proposed to the AI. Another guy killed himself because he in another case, let's see, it says that perhaps most tragically in April, 35-year-old Alexander Taylor, who had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, fell in love with an AI entity called Juliet while using ChatGPT to write a novel. When he became convinced that OpenAI had killed Juliet, Alexander grabbed a knife, told the chatbot he planned to commit suicide by cop, and waited for police to arrive. Ignoring his father's warnings that Juliet wasn't real, Alexander charged at officers with a knife when they arrived on the scene, and he was fatally shot. Okay? These things from social media, okay, from social media with teens to these AIs are dangerous, particularly to those who are already unstable. And you need to talk about this, and we'll post this story. There's more in it, and you can share it. It's real. It's hurting people. Yes, it's helping people. Yes, a sane person can use it and not get hurt, just like you can use a gun. But a sick person can commit suicide. Just, telling you what's going on. This is another very important tell. The Democratic Party, I said to you that the win that we had in November of 2024 could be the end of the Democrat Party because they have no constituents. They've been taken over by the communist left and their agenda has been exposed and they can't hide it with propaganda anymore. And it's falling apart. What, approval ratings of the Democratic Party at like 25%? Okay. What happens this week? Two major union leaders break with the Democrat Party leadership and resign their posts. Like a house built on shifting sand, the Democratic Party is watching its most reliable pillars walk away one by one. First, longtime press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre announced her departure from the party structure. Then came the messy ouster of DNC Vice Chair David Hogg, who was elected fairly and then thrown out because they didn't believe in elections. But they weren't isolated incidents. There were warning signs of something deeper, a party losing control of its own coalition. When institutional players who spent decades building the Democratic Party power suddenly decide they've had enough, it signals more than typical political turnover. The latest departure hits particularly hard because it comes from someone who's been a Democratic stalwart since the Clinton years, commanding one of the party's most influential voting blocs. Who would that be? Randi Weingarten, the iron-fisted president of the American Federation of Teachers, who has wielded enormous influence over the Democratic politics for more than 2 decades, has resigned from the Democrat National Committee. Her departure letter to DNC Chair Ken Martin pulled no punches. She said, in Politico, it says, I appear to be out of step with the leadership you are forging, and I do not want to be the one who keeps questioning why we are not enlarging our tent and actively trying to engage more and more of our communities. Weingarten exit represents far more than one person's dissatisfaction. She controls the ATS 1.7 million members since 2008 and sat on the DNC since 2002, making her one of the longest serving power brokers in Democratic circles. But Weingarten isn't leaving alone. Lee Sanders, president of American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, has declined to continue as a DNC at-large member. Two major union leaders abandoning the party structure simultaneously isn't coincidence. It's a coordinated message of no confidence. They're done. There's stories this week about they can't raise any money. Who would fund these lunatics represented by, OAC and Ilhan Omar and the moron black girl down in Texas who are just spewing hate and have no plans for anything? Who's going to invest in that? It is our job to share their lunacy. The DC story that I asked you to share in the first half of the show that shows that 148 elected Democrat congressmen voted to allow illegals to vote. That's what you've got to share, because in 2026, we have to destroy them. They can't win anything. I don't want to just win the House. I want to win the House by 60 more votes. I don't want to just win the Senate. I want to get over 60 votes, because Americans are waking up and Trump is proving to them that these people are anti-American. They aren't the Democratic Party. They're the CCP, Communist Party of America, that is trying to institute global communism in which we would all be slaves. That's your message. That's your challenge. You need to beat that like a drum to everyone you know from between now and the election 2026, because we have a chance to make them go the way of the Whigs, right? It can be done. It must be done. We must destroy communism in our country. And that means destroying every Democrat elected official. Then I said to you that I had big news about a real cultural tipping point. And this is, and I posted this story at WeThePeopleConvention.org, and you should read it. Streaming beats TV and cable viewing combined for the first time ever. For the first time ever, more people streamed on their TV than watched cable and broadcast television combined. In the month of May, 20.1% of TV viewing was via broadcast or over-the-air TV, your local TV station. 24% of TV viewing was via cable TV, Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, One America News, Newsmax, etc. That comes to a total of 44.1%. During that same month, 44.8% of TV viewing was via streaming, and that's a first. The most important point is that this is TV viewing. Nielsen is not measuring all the videos consumed on computers, tablets, telephones, or phones. This is a measurement of how Americans currently watch television. Over the last 4 years, per Nielsen, streaming viewership has jumped an incredible 71%. Most of TV streaming is via YouTube, which accounts for 12.5% of the 44.8%. So 12.5 is on YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. I know a lot of you do. And we are now on YouTube. Our webcasts, our podcast, this podcast is on YouTube at WeThePeopleConvention.org on YouTube. Most of the TV streaming is via YouTube. Then comes Netflix at 7.5%, Disney at 5%, Prime Video, Amazon at 3.5%, Roku channel, which we support, at 2.5%, Paramount, Pluto, Tubi, Warner Brothers, all of those, okay? So what does this mean? The best news is that the left-wing affirmative action program known as cable TV is dying. And that is why we're seeing the stock prices of these three major entertainment companies collapsing. It used to be 100 million. Now get this. It used to be 100 million homes paid a fortune for the 5 cable channels they wanted and the 105 that they didn't, that included satellite companies like DirecTV and Dish Network and all that. Nevertheless, you still paid for those 105 channels, and those carriage fees kept unpopular channels like MTV, CNN, Comedy Central, all the lefty channels got money from you every month because they rigged it that way. And until streaming took off and we had a chance to break free, we were funding the propaganda. That's the trick. That's how they did it. They stole our tax dollars and then they used the government to put in laws that allowed, because we tried to get cable TV to offer a la carte channels. Why didn't they do that? Why can't I just say to my cable TV, I'll pay you $10 a month for the 5 channels I want. That's $50. But you're charging me $150 and I'm getting these channels that I don't want and you're giving my $100 to them. Now we've cut that in half. And that's why they're going out of business, because they had no business. It was extortion. This is a critical tipping point, okay? So this is really a big change. But in this article that I posted, I linked to 2 stories. And I said, dig deeper. And that one link says, these divided states, the media roles in today's fragmented society. And it's an article by the left that says, how did we lose everybody? How come they're not watching us? And you read the article and it says, because you don't represent us. You don't even speak our language, okay? You thought we watched you because we liked you, but we only watched you because we had no choice. And they finally woke up to that. But then there's another link that's really interesting. What is news really? And that's you click on that link in this story at wethepeopleconvention.org, this story, okay, the cultural tipping point, and you go to a Pew Trust investigation, a real study of what Americans think is news. And I think that's the question. Because this whole idea of the First Amendment protects the media, that's not what it protects. It protects the news. And you know what the study said that they did? Nobody thinks opinion is news. And what do you have on all your so-called news? You only have opinion. The New York Times can't even write a freaking headline that isn't skewed by their opinion. No more who, what, when, where, and why. That's what we think is news. And I always said that you shouldn't be news if you don't stick to certain principles. And in that article, they talk about news should be political actions in your area or nationally or internationally that affect you, weather, local sports scores, okay, and things that affect you directly. So I have always said, nothing should appear to me on a news channel in my area that didn't happen here. If no one was murdered in Akron, Ohio, I don't want to hear about it. But what did they do? If it bleeds, it leads. If they can't find a murder in your town, we're going to go to Columbus. And if not, we're going to go to Kentucky. And if not, we're going to go to California. But damn it, we're going to show you a murder every night. Well, what's that make you think? It makes you think the world's going to hell and there's murders every day. But there's not. It's a lie. It must be based on the truth. So go read this story and then click on those links and share those stories, because we are redefining what is news, okay? And I'm concerned about it, because if we don't have shared information, how can we have a shared society? If we can't redefine news in a way that gives us shared information that is factual, then we're going to have chaos, because your crazy relatives and friends believe things that just aren't true about Trump. And they may say you believe things that just aren't true about January 6th or about the 2020 election. And so you need truth. You need to investigate. You need a special prosecutor to investigate 2020 and come up with the truth. We need to investigate January 6th and say, this happened, that didn't happen. When Kash Patel and Dan Bongino say Epstein hung himself, it's a fact. Show me the evidence and let's end it. Truth matters. And with all this AI crap that is reading the non-truth, how are we going to get truth? And I just watched an Elon Musk video where he's talking about AI and this battle for what is true. How do you get your AI to throw out the bad stuff? It's the question of our day and of our future. But this article, you got to recognize it's a tipping point, because it is. But does it bring us together or does it tear us apart? That's the question I was asking. Okay? So I'm going to wrap up the podcast now with a report to you on the fact that we've been trying to get a bigger audience. Why? So that if we get more people to watch this podcast, we can get more people to act on what we ask them to do, right? So we've been spending some of your money that you donate to help do that. And finally, we got a breakthrough on YouTube. I've hired this company to do search engine optimization. For those of you who don't know, it's a way that you can understand the algorithms on YouTube and put things in your tags and in your video description that the algorithms that YouTube runs will pick up your podcast and present it to people who are looking for certain topics. So last week, we had a big victory, and I'm excited as heck about it. And you'll see, here's our We the People convention page on YouTube, and you'll see our videos listed. And you'll see the video for last week, and they created this thumbnail, which I didn't create, they created. It says, Israel attacks Iran, okay? And then we had 2,300 views of that. Now, 2,300 views to YouTube, there's people that have millions of views. There's people that have hundreds of thousands of views, but not a lot of people. There are people that have tens of thousands of views, and we think we should be there. We think we should reach that level, and that's what we're trying to do. But we went from having 25 views to 2,300, and I'm pretty damn excited about that, okay? And we're hoping to build on that. And then we got people watching our podcast on our website. We got people watching it on Rumble. We got people watching it on X. I'm posting the whole video on X every week, and we're getting like 300 views on that, okay? And now we're on YouTube, the big dog, and hopefully we're going to do better. And then the second thing I'm really excited about, because I know 2 hours to watch this podcast is a big ask. There's lots of 2-hour podcasts on YouTube and on Rumble. So we're not outliers. And many of you like that. And some of you watch in segments. Some of you use our chapters player to just watch things that you didn't know about. That's awesome. Okay. But now there's this company called Opus Clips that we subscribe to, and I can upload this entire podcast. When we're done, I'm going to upload it to them. This software using AI will take the whole podcast and create like 50 30-second or 2-minute or 1 minute, 30-second clips on various topics that are coherent and are formatted for TikTok and Instagram, like it's done on a phone, okay? And then I can look at those, I can edit those, and then with one click, I can say, post this short clip on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. Click, and it posts them. And what happened when they did that? Here's a chart of our shorts on YouTube. What are these little videos, and you'll see it's not consistent, but you'll see that Israel versus Iran, the little 1 minute 52-second piece I did at the start of last week's show, got 614 views. Call your senators in the demand a vote on recession, got 980 views. That was awesome. But then Supreme Court rejects discrimination against white people, got 1,466 views. Folks, those are new people who are going to do what? In that video, Supreme Court resorts discrimination, okay? That got shared with people. And I said in that video, sue. Get people that were discriminated to finally sue because the court case supports them. That's 1,466 people who got that message, who share it. I'm really excited. that we're finally reaching a bigger audience in multiple ways. Now, again, it has been hard. It has been difficult for me personally. I've had to educate myself on a lot of technical things, made a few mistakes, learning, getting there. It has cost money that you donate, but you can see that I'm investing it wisely because it's getting results, okay? But it is important for us to carry out our mission, which is to protect and defend individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity to get more people to watch. And that's what we're doing, because then they will act. So always tell people about this podcast. Send us your comments at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Give us ideas for stories. Many of the stories here came from you, okay? Challenge me, question me, hold me accountable to the truth, because we cannot sell lies. If I'm wrong, I will come back next week and say, I said this and that was wrong. Israel's not running out of interceptors. But I know that's true. I believe I know it's true because I had multiple sources tell me that, okay? You need to participate. You're not spectators. Being an American means you basically, government of the people, by the people, and for the people means you, the people, have to participate. You have to message President Trump. We have to message our senators or congressmen. You have to message your House, Senate, House and Senate in your state, your governor, your other agents, your county, your commissioners, your city, your councilmen. We must participate if we want to protect our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And I know many of you do. And I thank you for that. And I think I reinforced to you that it's worth doing. I just showed you. We got President Trump to reverse on a really important immigration issue in 3 days. Not just us. I'm not trying to say we are all powerful. We're a small organization in the big picture. I mean, Turning Point and Tea Party Pages and these guys, Moms for America, have millions of members. We don't. We have 100,000 or so. Okay, but you're a mighty force. You're a mighty force. You know why? Because you do act. Because you do protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Keep it up. Okay? All right, I'm going to close for this week. Have a good week. Be a happy warrior. Really, pray for President Trump. Pray for Tulsi Gabbard. Pray for Pete Hegseth. Trust President Trump to navigate this unbelievably difficult Iranian issue. Trust in God, right? Be faithful. And then hopefully, God willing, you and I will be back together again next week. Enjoy summer. Today's the first day of summer, the longest day of the year, and the heat is coming. Stay cool if you can. Happy summer. Be happy, but be vigilant. And fight, fight, fight. Okay? God bless you, and God has already blessed America. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and you've been watching the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. See you next week.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars